When I came down here a few years ago, one of the things that I liked about the idea coming here was that it was remote. At the time, I had a scheme for making some money. Probably not much money, but in my head, it would have been enough to get me by. Life is considerably more expensive here than it was in either of the cities that I've really spent a lot of time in. Uh, there are things that I just won't purchase anymore, no matter how much money I have on me. I'm like, oh, I'm not paying $8 for a chocolate bar. We're done here. There are limits at some point. I expect all food to be more expensive than I'm going to pay for, and then I can waste away. Uh, I don't feel like I'm as remote as I want to be. I mean, if I'm seeing this little town in Holbrook 4 days a week for some period of time, and it only takes me an hour to get from wherever I'm living to, relatively. It's a small town, but it's a big small town, 4,000 people. It's enough people to be uncomfortable, not enough to really do anything interesting. City wise, clubs or whatever, you're never going to see. There's just not enough people here to pull anything off. To do that, well, it requires something that this place can't do. But at the same time, I don't feel remote. I can see the highway from my house. I can see 3 cell towers, which are frequently totally worthless to me. But I can see them, they exist. And not too far from here, there are areas where you don't see any of that. I go 30 miles north, you're in a different world. I might have to live somewhere more remote at some point in the future. And my issue with that would be, how the hell am I going to make a living? There are towns that are 3 or 4 hours away from any large place. Like Del City, Texas was one of the places we considered looking at property. We actually discussed it with a guy who had never been there and didn't know anything about his property. That's a whole other thing. Look up Del City, Texas. They made a movie about their town, and it's really an interesting little place. But you would be driving for hours to get to the next large town, which is El Paso, which is hundreds of miles away. I would consider that remote, living around 200 people and having one gas station and one restaurant and one little grocery store. We got a freaking Safeway here. It's better than a lot of the stores in Chicago, except for the price. Probably 50% higher on most things than it would be in Chicago or Phoenix. But, it costs people money to get stuff out here. The train doesn't stop here, so anything that does come here has to come in through a truck. I get it. So the idea of being more remote would require me to do things like catch food, you know, uh, which I don't know that I'm prepared to do. I might get used to the idea of doing some fishing, but I don't think that I'd be too interested in like shooting a deer. It doesn't seem like me. If you're gonna go to the trouble of killing something, you'd have to know how to dress it and store it, and just a whole field that I've never really had interest in. Plus, we wouldn't be talking about this place because you really couldn't make any sort of a rural, living out here. Uh, you'd be talking about Idaho or, you know, that part of the country or Alaska. I understand there's something between Washington and Alaska too, but I don't think it has any relevance. I didn't come down here looking to make a bunch of friends. I came out here to be away from people, to be away from all the crazy shit I saw going on around me, and I expect it's not over with. We're in a little pause right now, an interglacial of stupid events. But the glacier's still moving. We're still going to feel it. I'm largely far enough away from the world here to avoid most of that, but it is here. Rural. This is not a rural enough place to have its own real identity anymore, like a lot of rural places always did. It is part of internet culture, which I don't need to list off. Just whatever that means to you. These people and people in cities, to some extent, understand each other better than people in this town and people living in the mountains here. They're a different sort of people. Many of the regular people that I've talked to that grew up in Holbrook have never been out in the desert. They've never spent any time out there. Oh yeah, I went to Petrified Forest, when I was in junior high school. Which is like 25 miles away. It's right here. And you've never. Some people have only seen it since they were in grade school. I don't know if that's a small town mentality or what. I don't have enough experience with towns like this. Even the towns that I knew many years ago were military towns, and they may have an entirely different way of doing things now. On top of that, I wanted to get away from the internet culture that I am participating in right now. Having a dialogue that I don't feel like getting too specific in, because y'all got your own ideas about what's going on in the world, and that's fine. Unfortunately, I'm from the 90s, and in the 90s, we let other people have opinions about whatever the fuck they want, because whether someone was cool was more important than whether they were, your political arch enemy. I hate this dialogue. I hate the way that we're on the stupidest timeline. If I'd had a team of good writers hanging out with me 15 years ago when we were writing the future, to be as, not possible, we'd be writing this world that we're doing. So I do my best to hide from it, and if I feel I have to hide more later, then we'll make that decision later. Hopefully I won't have any major health problems that stand in the way of that. Otherwise I'll fucking be wandering around in the desert.